Hello and welcome to Glasgow Loves You. And this evening we're joined by Daniel Kelemen. Daniel Kelemen is Professor of Political Science and Law at Jean Monnet Chair in University European Union Politics at Rutgers University. Kelemen's research focuses on politics, European Union, law and politics, comparative political economy, and comparative public policy. He's been documenting the impacts of Brexit via tweets, and he has hit 1,000 impacts yesterday. So this evening we're celebrating that with him. So welcome, Professor.
Thank you. Celebrating or mourning?
Yeah, good question. And so we're helped by Paul and IT, and then Dee will be taking your questions on social media. So if you have any questions, just pop them on Twitter. So welcome, Professor. And can you just tell us briefly about your career and how did you become a professor? And how did you become interested in European law in particular?
Well, let's see, to make a long story short, I suppose I got interested in European politics in general, probably from living in Europe when I was a child and lived in Germany. And my father actually was an immigrant to the US originally from Hungary. And so I learned a lot about kind of comparative politics just growing up from those kind of experiences, and eventually decided to go to graduate school, studied European politics, and then the kind of move over into law. Actually, I was going to study originally the transitions to democracy in Eastern Europe, but this was in the late 90s. But then I thought, oh, all those countries want to join this thing called, the European Union, right? So I should learn something about it. And then I just became fascinated with the EU and eventually with, the intersection of law and politics in the EU. And that's kind of how it happened. So.
Brilliant. That's really interesting. And so just getting down to business then, what did you think of Brexit as a concept, like before the referendum?
Well, I thought it was a very bad idea for the UK. That being said, I thought, well, it's a choice, for the British people. It's totally legitimate to have a vote on that. It's right there in the treaties, Article 50. Countries can leave if they want. No one's forced to stay against their will. So, I thought it's a legitimate exercise if a country wants to consider leaving. But I thought that leaving was a supremely bad idea for the UK, both in that it would be very economically damaging, and in that, I think the EU, for all its flaws, is a great project that has a lot to offer. And the British people and the UK as a country had done, contributed so much to the EU. So it just seemed kind of tragic to, throw that all away. And I thought it was a very bad idea in terms of, I thought it posed risks for the integrity of the UK long term, which I think we're seeing signs of that, with Northern Ireland, Scottish independence, those things. So, anyway, those are some ideas. So, I was against it, but I'm an American citizen, so it's for you guys to decide, not me, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you obviously had an opinion of it though, because you started the thread.
Well, yeah, and look, I lived in the UK. I used to be an Oxford Don. I care a lot about the country. I've traveled to the UK since I was a kid and always been enamored of many aspects of British culture. My wife is half British, a British citizen, so it's very personal. I have many relatives, many friends, and spent a few years, as I said, living there myself. And so, yeah, I follow the issue very closely. But what really got me going on the thread, what upset me is not so much, the decision to leave, but it's the lying about the consequences, from its promoters, just these ridiculous claims. And that's the part that got under my skin.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. And like, where do you think that Alexit came from, like as a concept? Where did it originate and why?
Oh, well, I have to say this without being too rude, but I mean, Brexit from the right, I may completely disagree with them and they may lie a lot, but I can see the kind of logic, for a lot of, if you're a kind of Jacob Rees-Mogg, you think, okay, I want to deregulate the economy and have a kind of Singapore on the Thames that sort of model, have low labor standards, low environmental standards, low taxes. Then you might think, okay, let's get out of the EU because they impose some minimum standards and regulations on many of those things. So I might disagree with them completely, but I can see their logic, right? I mean, Legxit has never made an ounce of sense to me. Just seemed like, basically nonsensical. The idea that the UK could better pursue a left agenda outside the EU, when actually most of the social democracies with more advanced welfare states and redistribution, higher environmental standards, et cetera, are EU member states, right? So how could it make sense that the UK was being inhibited in pursuing such things by being an EU member, right? When Sweden is perfectly able to do them, right? Et cetera. And in fact, it was often UK governments, that were pushing for the more neoliberal aspects of the EU, right? Rather than sort of the EU imposing them on the UK, it was UK governments trying to push them in the EU. So it never made sense to me. But, there were some, scholars and politicians, and I think some of it goes way back, of course, to, people, when you think of people like Corbyn, the early opposition of Labour to the then European communities, right? And some of that stuck in the thinking, I suppose.
So that kind of thinking was maybe stuck in the 70s when it was just starting out as a neoliberal organization, and it just got stuck in their heads, maybe.
Yeah, but there's a new generation of people who agree with that thinking. And I guess, for them, look, the truth is the EU has both dynamics. It's a big market, so that creates competition. And it means, there are limits on state aid policy and things like that. And that more competitive environment, does mean that some uncompetitive industries will sometimes go bust, right? And so if those who are tempted by, well, the solution to that is protectionism. Yeah, I can see where, they would have something against the EU, but that kind of ignores the fact, that the EU also has many social regulations and standards that protect those kind of left values, environment, consumers, safety of workers, conditions for workers, all those things. And also kind of just ignores the fact that, again, many countries are able to have far higher social standards of every kind you can think of than the UK had while being EU member states. So there were things to complain about in that respect in the UK, but they weren't the fault of the EU.
Exactly. Yeah, indeed. And so did you ever think, the day after the referendum, what did you think? Did you actually conceive of it actually happening?
The day after the referendum,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you something. It's funny. My best political prognostication, and I'm not saying I'm much of a prognosticator, but my daughter, who she got a couple different nationalities, but when I was living in the UK, so this was 2004, I remember coming back from a day in Oxford in the senior common room, and I don't know, colleagues reading the Telegraph or something, talking about Europe. And I came home and I said, we have to make sure that she also gets her Belgian nationality, to which she was entitled, because I bet this country is not going to be in the EU when she grows up. So that was like 2004. But that being said, like 2 weeks before the referendum, I thought, oh no, it's going to, Remain is going to win, right? So I guess on the one hand, I always had feelings about the awkwardness and the tensions of the fit of the UK and the EU, and that there was all this, antagonism in a lot of about the EU. But yeah, the numbers looked okay a couple of weeks before, so I thought, it would go all right. But so I woke up that morning in the US very surprised, like many people were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I remember the feeling myself, just complete shock. So how did you come up with the idea of documenting then the Brexit impacts under is it Brexit reality thread on Twitter?
Look, I didn't have a big plan at all. It was just, I think I started it a couple of weeks into January, just as I started, read the papers and see more and more stories, right, trickling out about all these negative impacts that were happening, many of which were exactly kind of things that had been predicted by experts and denied by Brexiteers. So I thought, okay, well, Twitter's a good vehicle to just keep track of it, because you'd sort of see stories here and there, and I thought, okay, let's like put them all in a row. But I didn't have any big ambitions or have any concept of how long I might do it or anything.
Was it just kind of born out of pure frustration at the propaganda that was being told, or did you want to hold people to account for what they said?
Well, look, there's holding to account. I don't have any I, I don't have any illusions about the extent to which people will really be held to account, especially since in our kind of polarized age, the supporters of these kind of movements, whether it's Brexit or the MAGA movement here, they just ignore information that doesn't support their presuppositions anyway, right? And kind of confirmation bias. So I'm not expecting to hold people to account or change minds that way. But I guess to me, the role of an academic partly is to try to like pursue the truth and, that sort of thing. And yeah, when you see just such lies about something that is easily empirically refuted, it just seems like they need to be called out, just to have a historical record of, the truth. Eventually, I feel like the truth maybe wins out, even if you lose politically for a long time,
Somewhat like a Pyrrhic victory. So where do you source the impacts? And, do people submit them to you? Do you go searching for them or?
Look, it's very simple. I didn't actually spend that much time on this because, this is just a little hobby or something you call it. I basically like every day I would just do a Google search for news articles mentioning Brexit or maybe Brexit and a few other keywords like, jobs, exports, that sort of thing. In the past 24 hours, usually, right? So just to see recent ones. And then I would just see which, looked interesting. And then sometimes people would alert me to them, right? And send, suggestions. I did have a few criteria that I tried to follow, and I won't say I followed them 100% because in doing 1,000, I'm sure I messed up a few times. But I mean, my guiding kind of principles were I wanted to just focus on economic impacts. So I ignored a lot of personal stories of families that had problems because of, separation, Brexit, even though those are terrible impacts. I said from the beginning, I want to look at the economic impacts because that's something that, these Brexiteers really lied about a lot, right? So economic, I tried to always never like post like tabloids, so like legitimate sources. I almost never would like just do something based on a tweet. It always had to be like a newspaper article. Once in a while, there were a couple, if it was like a journalist, kind of very credible person, something, but even though there were lots of individual stories people would tweet about, and I didn't doubt that they were totally true, I just figured, well, then someone could sort of suggest, oh, that could be made up. It's just a tweet, So I tried to just basically, link to stories in credible publications or industry newsletters or things like that, right? Where someone could read the whole article if they wanted.
Yeah. So you had like particular sources that you would trust?
Yeah. And I mean, certainly, all the sort of credible broadsheet newspapers, I'm not including the Telegraph. Generally those kind of things. And then respectable, kind of think tanks, industry associations that would be talking about things like that. So things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. I think we'll just pop over to social media now to see if there's any questions there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have one question, which is, have you had any abuse or trolling in response to all of this from anybody?
Be careful because maybe knock on wood, not much. I mean, a little bit, but not much. Okay. And mostly just, on Twitter, and then you just block people. So who cares? A couple emails that were rude. But I mean, I write a lot of, look, Brexit is like even though it's very depressing, it's like the less depressing topic. I usually work on issues around democratic backsliding in Hungary and Poland. And if you write an article about Poland, especially, you get a lot of like abusive email and stuff like that, if about backsliding. So yeah, this wasn't so bad in comparison. No real complaints there.
Okay. I guess because it's kind of not personal opinions as such, it's you're reporting articles. I mean, it's personal, but not like personal,
Yeah, no,
in the way
it's
that
true.
it invites it.
I try to never put too much of my, once in a while, probably a little bit, but I usually try to just like put a quote from the article and retweet an article. And I also try to avoid op-eds, even though some of them, are very, I try to just be news articles. But yeah, I was just like linking to things that are out there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Brilliant. So did you ever think then that you would actually reach 1,000, or was it always your aim to reach 1,000? Are you really going to stop now, or are you going to continue?
I'm going to stop. I didn't have any aim, as I said. I had no idea if it was going to be 10 or 100. I didn't think about it really. I just did it, and then it just kept growing and growing. And I didn't have an exact endpoint in mind. But I guess gradually over time, I was thinking, okay, well, I don't want to do this forever, because it just gets to be a bit tiring to do every day, even if it's not a lot of time, right? And it is depressing and all that. But also, I feel like, because a lot of some people were commenting, don't stop now, it's getting worse than ever. And they're true, the impacts are being, but in a sense, I think it's like less necessary now, because there were a few months in there where there weren't that many. I mean, there were stories always, there's always a trickle, but they weren't on the front pages. There weren't so many, there wasn't so much attention. So there, I feel like I was doing a bit more of a public service to keep tracking it, the little obscure stories, but with real impacts, right? I think now it's like on the front page of every paper, right? So my marginal contribution is a little less, in the sense, because it's not like a big secret now, right? At all. I mean, it just seemed like a nice round number. I thought I guess I was, for a while, I have been thinking I might stop around October 1st, because that was like real Brexit, when the UK was going to actually impose the border checks, that they've been holding off on in Northern Ireland, for instance. But then they punted on that again and delayed that. So, who knows when the real final date of the full imposition of, all the repercussions of Brexit will come. So, but yeah, I think, I'm not saying I'll never, tweet something out about an impact, but I'm not going to do, a daily, kind of updates the way I have, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like Brexit reality of the month or something, one a month. Okay. I don't know, we'll see, but not daily.
I see. And so in the middle of it all, like, did you actually realize, you think, that in years to come that historians will be, maybe quoting your tweets and that? And did you realize, you were actually documenting history? Was that a conscious thing?
It was not. And yeah, again, I doubt that. I mean, who knows how historian actually, digital history, who knows how that'll go. We'll maybe when, some years, many years from now, we'll see that kind of going into action. So, but no, I didn't intend that. I don't even expect it. I do think where it could be useful is it's, anytime someone catalogs things all together, it's useful, right? Digital historians could like dig up all this stuff, themselves online, but it certainly makes it a lot easier for someone looking to have 1,000 stories in a row and kind of go from there. Yeah. Okay.
And I think they definitely will be quoting your tweets in years to come. But I've just got a more kind of general overview question now. So what is the US view of the EU and the UK now? And do you think it's changed now that we've got a different president?
Well, I guess when you say US, one could take that to mean like society or the government. I'll stick with the government, I think, for now. Society, that's a bigger question. But I mean, the Biden administration, certainly, wants to have good relations with the EU and the UK. There's been some little rows lately. So, both very close allies. I think, definitely there's been a change since, the Trump administration. They basically, and he called the EU repeatedly a foe, right? Trump basically, if it was up to him, probably would have wanted to destroy an organization like the EU because it's so kind of antithetical to his ideology. He doesn't like, and those around him didn't like the idea of multilateral cooperation, a kind of supranational organization that would, sort of have that kind of role that the EU has. His mindset was much more about, countries putting themselves and their interests first, et cetera. So the EU is kind of an exemplar of what, one can achieve through that kind of cooperation. It's something he hated, right? Not to mention that the EU, often tried to promote things like, policies like, let's say, supporting international climate policy and things that he was against, right? So the Biden administration's big departure from that. I guess one other thing I'd say on the US, EU, UK relations is, ironically, the UK, when it was an EU member, often they would try to frame themselves as like, we're a bridge between the US and the EU, and they were EU members, but they're like, we have the special relationship with the US. We're an EU member, so we'll be the ones that the US talks to kind of understand and access the EU. Well, that's of course gone. And now it's more like the US has to be the bridge between the UK and the EU to stop you two from fighting, right? So we want you all to get along in the kind of transatlantic alliance with us. And we're worried about the mounting, kind of economic disagreements and things between the UK and the EU. And yeah, I guess, we'll see with the big thing, the Biden administration, I think the point of tension with the UK really could be about Northern Ireland. And, if they go ahead with, this stuff of trying to scrap the protocol, that's going to be a real problem for the Biden administration. So that's the potential source of tension down the line.
Yeah, I think he's made that very clear. They're very protective of Good Friday Agreement. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've been told that we've lots of questions coming in from social media, so hand you over to Dee.
Well, I've just got a couple. They're quite different, actually. One is, where will the UK end up? Norway plus ? And the other one is, what would your prognosis be for the economy in the short to medium term, particularly in concerns of food shortages for average families and individuals? So that's quite specific. And the other one is a much bigger question, really, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to push beyond my expertise. No, I am not a supply chain expert, right? We're all learning a lot about supply chain, aren't we, lately? And so we're all getting an education. I mean, unfortunately, all the signs I'm seeing following these things are that for the UK specifically, I mean, take a step back and say it's true, as the deniers of Brexit reality try to say, it's true that many countries are having supply chain issues now, and there's global problems with supply chains, from Asia to the US to Europe, around the world. Okay, so that's true. So everyone's having those issues. But because Brexit has so intensified those problems by cutting yourself off in your supply chains, from your biggest export market, et cetera, it looks to me like it's going to be pretty ugly next few months in terms of further disruptions, right? Both in, in a wider and wider range of products, right? Because the HGV driver thing isn't going to be sorted anytime quick, and more generally, and then even like the whole panic buying thing, that again, some people blame the panic buying. That's like, blaming the victim.
Chicken and egg, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's blaming the victim or chicken and egg, because, yeah, of course, the people panic bought for a reason, right? And I think the danger is that as more news of other kind of shortages comes up, human nature being what it is, there will be more panic buying in other sectors. So it'll be, it'll spread. So I think there's going to be more shortages in the UK for some time in a wider range of products. I mean, I think in the larger macroeconomic effects, I would just point people to a lot of the very high quality reports, done on this by places like, institutes in the UK and the Changing Europe, Center for European Reform, others, people who did studies projecting, and government bodies of various sorts, earlier that did studies projecting the long-term impact. I mean, no one's saying that the, UK is going to, go into a massive depression or become like some developing country. Of course not, right? But it's going to, take a notch of a couple points of GDP, right? And that's real, those are real impacts that hurt, people. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'd say. It's, a dent, but not a total macroeconomic disaster.
I think the political aspect of that is it's frustrating that obviously the Tories are not going to admit that it's anything to do with Brexit, but Labour are nearly as bad by just not wanting to mention the B word at all. So nobody's acknowledging it, except for people like us who've been saying it for so many years, and we're told we were Project Fear.
That's a bigger topic, Labour and their strategies.
No, we don't need to get into that.
I mean, it is quite something to have a government that through its headline policy, which is Brexit, leads to massive shortages of petrol, leads to empty shelves in supermarkets throughout the country, all this, and still the opposition isn't making big gains in the polls. I mean, that's a bigger topic why, but that is very problematic for a democracy when the governing party can basically screw up the most basic things and doesn't seem to pay a price.
And the Norway Plus question? Any idea where we might end up?
I mean, I guess that depends. It depends on your time scale. In the long run, we're all dead, right? As Kate said. So what is our time scale in the sense that I don't see anything like a Norway Plus happening anytime soon. No, I think, basically, the Tories have gone for the hardest of hard Brexits. So it's, basically just this free trade agreement model, based on the deal they did with the EU. And, we're seeing that, many of the negative consequences that people warned would come from going with this model rather than, let's say, like the, Norway models or whatever. You're experiencing those negative repercussions, but they still have pretty firm hold on power. And so unfortunately, I don't see a big change from something kind of close to where you are now in terms of the model of relations with the EU, right?
Okay, thanks very much. I'll give you back to Jenny.
Okay, we're running out of time very quickly. I'll just ask you just one more question. Are you optimistic that national populism will come to an end in the UK if the effects of Brexit continue with the way they are?
Oh, I know I'm going to sound very depressing, but I know I'm not optimistic about that. I think, because I guess the logic there would be, would this discredit the kind of populists and their agenda, by showing the kind of all the economic problems that, following their ideas led to. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening, because it seems to me like now, given the degree of polarization in British society, and we have something similar here in the US, people just interpret these things, through their ideological lens, and the supporters of those movements, right? They just refuse to attribute, the things that are obviously due to Brexit, et cetera, to Brexit or to the, policies of the national populist government to that, and they just kind of make up excuses for it. So unfortunately, I don't see it coming to an end. I think, it's not to say I think those trends will go on forever, but I don't think this alone will knock them down a rung.
Right. Okay. Well, on that cheery note, we'll have to let you go, I'm afraid. But I'm sure there are lots of people out there really appreciate all the time and effort you put into building that thread, definitely. And you have a lot of fans over here, that's for sure.
Well, I appreciate that. And I care a lot about the UK and Scotland and Glasgow as well. It's nice to be on with you, a lovely city where I visited. So it was my pleasure to kind of just help keep track of this stuff. And I hope people will find, the list useful just for giving evidence, and whenever anyone, tries to spout some BS about Brexit having no costs or whatever, it's easy to throw a dose of reality in their face.
Yeah, that always helps to have the evidence and to back up what you're saying. Definitely. I'm sure that historians will be quoting them in years to come. Definitely.
Well, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.